Greetings and welcome back to the channel, World War II Books Where to Start. I'm your host, Admiral Max Horton, speaking to you from my office at the Derby House, where I'm wearing myself out, working night and day to keep the convoys running in this titanic struggle against the forces of tyranny that have overtaken Europe. That being the case, I'd like to bring some nautical shenanigans to the yard today to relate the tale of the wind and waves on the Atlantic run and how it was fought, destroyer versus sub versus convoy, and everybody versus weather. And with that salty introduction, let's hit the books. All right, first up, U-Boat Killer by Donald Macintyre from 1956. 191 very brief pages. And of course, I have the classic Bantam War edition. It's so old, I bought it used for like 50 cents back in the 80s, and I already had the cover ripped off. But I kept it all these years because of this gorgeous thing right here. And I think you would agree that's probably worthwhile keeping. So, this is a masterclass and kind of the to-the-point storytelling with virtually no fluff and certainly no long asides. It's mercifully free of the ladder climbing aspirations some war memoirists insist on relating ad nauseum. See my review of David Rayner's Escort in my video Surface Action Atlantic for a rundown on that kind of idea. U-Boat Killer, I feel, is an essential reference for the war against the U-boats. Before I dive in, he's got a couple little zingers in the text I just didn't get and couldn't find a reference to on the internet. One is called Slap Hare, H-A-R-E. I presume that's like put on speed real quick and go get the bad guys. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's a hunting metaphor or an old British ism. Maybe it was a naval war slang that faded out after the war. I don't know. Anyone? And there's another thing about the convoy rituals. It says you have to perform certain convoy rituals when you put to sea. I presume that means just getting everybody in formation and heading out on the right bearing, but I couldn't find like a real reference point to corroborate that either. So any help there would be cool. He gives us just a bit of background on his career, having set his sights on anti-sub warfare early after his first assignment to destroyers and a med, but he sidetracked himself with a desire to fly, and so he volunteered for the Fleet Air Arm, flying for 7 years from Hermes and Courageous. An illness forces him ashore, and when he returns to duty, he was granted his first command, the Kingfisher. And he goes back to the China Station in a ship named Defender, also commanding Venomous, Hardy, which was renamed Hesperus, and Walker, these last three being in World War II. Early in the war, he's got escorting runs taking the BEF to France and Belgium, and later the Norwegian campaign, where he has a couple of adventures, shall we say, and casually notes that the idea of a destroyer carrying a full load of torpedoes when operating inshore with skies hotly contested is not a great idea, as he watches another destroyer get blown to smithereens when the bomb lands square on his boom torpedo launching apparatus there on the deck. All stated in the laconic British way, of course. Once out on the Atlantic run, he's got very little time to adjust to the situation, for his escort group is involved in the convoy battle, escorting HX-112 inbound in March of 41. His group manages to take on the big three in one go: Preen, Kretschmer, and Shepke, all racked up inside of something like 72 hours or less. So far as the mystery of Preen is concerned, and for many naval historians it is still a mystery, he states that Wolverine, which was credited with the kill of Unit 407 during the war, but credit was withdrawn post-war, that Wolverine's first attack caused a propeller shaft to start grinding, which allowed them to track and attack again. I presume he had this info from the CO of Wolverine, who was his friend as well as the subordinate, in a pub or after action report or something later on. But this event is not mentioned in Blair's description of the attack on Preen, nor is the red flash beneath the water the crew of the Wolverine saw. Blair relates that they saw, or thought they saw, an orange flash, but were uncertain. Macintyre also states there was wreckage observed on the surface, which is not related in the Blair or in the second book I'll cover in a little bit today. An interesting contradiction, that's page 252 in Volume 1 of Clay Blair's Hitler's U-Boat War, if you're wanting to chase that down. Rowland's quote was there was an orange light, I'm guessing in an after-action report, for about 10 seconds. So we're left to wonder if Rowland, CEO of Wolverine, was a bit happy in his cups when he told the story to Macintyre and embellished it a bit for a CEO, or did the tale grow in the telling when Macintyre sat down to write his memoir and his memory had fuzzed a little bit with this incident in a war full of such, memorable events? We may never know, but the supposition that it might have been Preen's own crew as being the cause of the loss later on strikes me as odd. He had a well-honed crew, driven to perfection by both Preen and his officers, and very proud to serve under him, even though the man was a martinet by all accounts. The idea that a mine got him on the way home back to Lorient is tantamount to a ghost story as far as I'm concerned, and it's hard to understand why so many historians like to leave this matter up in the air. If Rowland saw an orange light, or red light, whatever, for about 10 seconds below the surface, while his ship still had a strong ASDIC contact, doesn't that point to either a detonation of the U-boat's torpedoes or a battery explosion as the boat is crushed either by excessive depth or as a result of being cracked open by Wolverine's depth charges? This armchair admiral is inclined to come down the side of the obvious. Rowland's attack did crack some seams, led in the water, the boat sank deeper, and unable to recover past the crush depth, and went kaboom. We'll never know for certain, of course, unless some oligarch with gobs and gobs of money to throw at the situation will find the ways and means to discover the wreck on the floor of the Atlantic. But it's a fascinating, ongoing mystery of the war. So then, in Macintyre's analysis of the events of the convoy battle, I don't know how he did this really, writing after the war when he had to actually know better, he says that he thinks the Germans had to turn to Wolfpack attacks in desperation after the sudden expansion of the U-boat arm because of the start of the war, and with severe losses in commanders and NCOs from pre-war cadres. That's exactly wrong. He misses the point that Wolfpack's strategy was premised on getting enough boats on target, that is, in a classic sense of warfare, concentration of force. And then he somehow gets the notion that even though he was there and fought these guys, that the penetration of the convoy to shoot for inside was given up after the losses in 41. As the battles went on, the surface escorts were all equipped with radar. It simply became less and less likely a U-boat on the surface was going to be able to penetrate the screen at night, no matter how hard they tried. But they never gave up trying. It was Jonas's only tactic, and he stuck to it like glue throughout the war, far, far too long with boats that were not up to the task. I'll discuss the Kretschmer connection later in this video regarding the second book today, so hang on for that one. Other matters. There were trips out of Londonderry, where the escorts would meet up with the tanker offshore to top off before they head out to sea with the convoy. While doing so, he calls what he calls bum boats would sally out to the destroyers or frigates and sell them various victuals and sundries, such as nylon stockings and fresh eggs. Nylons always being a hot commodity during the war, of course. It turns out only the top layers of the egg cartons would normally be fresh, and the nylons were bad quality, so they're just good for a couple wearings and they were done. But who's got time to complain about rotten eggs and running stockings when we're fighting a war, right? It ain't war hell. And now for some highlights, and a book chock full of them. He had a Huff Duff operator in Hesperus that was so good he could tell if a U-boat was surfaced or had just surfaced if it was transmitting, because its signal was different than when it was dry. He also goes on with a very good description of ground wave versus skywave transmissions and how to tell the difference. And if you intercepted a ground wave, it was a good chance that the boat was 20 miles or less away from you. Warm and sunny weather was bad for sonar conditions, making echoes fuzzy and uncertain. Canadian escorts were the worst of the three Allied navies and were very bad for most of the war. This may be Brit chauvinism, though. By other accounts, they performed much better the longer the war went on. But, food for thought, while stationed in Argentia, he saw one Canadian warship come in from an escort run so badly disciplined, it had a sign painted on its hull, on a superstructure that read, "We want leave." I'm guessing that raised some hackles on Western approaches, as well as Ottawa. Signs like that raise the terror of mutiny in admirals' minds, and that's never a good thing. Of all the nations sailing in convoys, somebody had to be the worst. And he assigns the tail on the donkey to the Greeks here. He says they were the worst in slow convoys. They made a lot of smoke, bad at station keeping, and the ships were old and broke down a lot. Summer and fall 42 was fairly quiet, with radar and Huff Duff making attacks very hard for the U-boats to mount. And Captain Bligh of HMS Bounty is brought up as one of the rare asides in this book. He's at pains to tell us that Bligh was actually a good officer and made flag rank. It's kind of weird, offshoot out of nowhere, but it kind of stuck in my mind. There's a homing pigeon that lands on one of his ships during the Normandy campaign with a note in its little holder there on its leg from the French resistance, saying it was a German HQ that the armies on the ground hadn't found yet, and later on it was supposedly destroyed by air power. Later in the war, he gets put on the Arctic run and has the misfortune to get the attention of a U-boat who knows his business for once, and puts a torpedo both into his escort Bickerton and the carrier Nabob. Bickerton has his stern blown off, which indicates a T5 homing torpedo. And Macintyre wants to save Bickerton, but he's under obligation to take care of Nabob, and kind of get the impression that he'd rather let the carrier go to hell and keep his ship. That's another sign of a guy who's been on escort runs so long with convoy duty, that the idea of carriers being superior and more valuable units just doesn't cut much slack with him. He flew as an observer in a coastal command aircraft for a little bit to figure out why they were so useless, he tells us, in no uncertain terms. And why they suck, even if they're gung-ho and willing to do the job, they're just no damn good at it. Training a young Padawan, it's all about training as his solution. After that loss of his ship Bickerton, he gets put ashore for recovery, but this time it ain't going to happen, and reports back for duty. His superior officer asks if he's ready to go back on the Atlantic run. He says, "Nope, I've had it. I'm done. I can't take it anymore." Much like David Rayner, he realized he had hit the end of his endurance and simply couldn't stand up to the strain of command anymore. And the story ends right there. Chop. No happy VE day, no melancholy over the end of the war, no happy reunion with the family, no post-war, I did this, that, nothing. It just ends. It's weird. I've admitted most of his U-boat kills for the sake of brevity and for sake of discovery. If you read it, I don't want to spoil all the fun ahead of time. It's great. It's essential. If you've never run across it and have any affinity for the Battle of the Atlantic, this will set your hair on fire. I guarantee it. That is U-Boat Killer by Donald Macintyre. And now we continue with Otto Kretschmer by Lawrence Patterson, featuring an indecently long subtitle. Really, there's got to be a rule about this. 6 words or less, or don't do it at all. This one's like half a sentence or 3/4 of a sentence. It's ridiculous. This is from 2018. It's 419 pages total. Kretschmer's background is a bit unusual in that he spends some time at a school in England when he was a teen, and then he picks up some good language skills as a result. Going to the Navy, opts into the U-boat arm and is assigned to U-35, Type 7A. When the captain is displaced by Rudolf Rosing for a spell to test out the boats in the Baltic, Kretschmer gets bumped down in the pecking order of second watch officer for a bit, and one day while inspecting the deck gun, Rosing goes ahead and submerges without kind of warning Kretschmer at all. So Kretschmer's kind of flailing around in the water for a little bit till Rosing figures out somebody's missing and comes back to fetch him. No apologies, just go below and get dry. And that kind of sours their relationship forevermore. There's also another incident with the rations and budgeting that Rosing kind of deceives him on and then pins the tail on the donkey. And Kretschmer's got to pay the difference back out of his own salary. And that forever seals the lack of affection between those two. Not a good look for Rosing, even though he was eventually a Knight's Cross winner, sinking 12 ships in U-48 and got a shore billet really early on in the war. Otto was given a duck for his first command, the U-23, Type 2, and he makes most of it early in the war in the North Sea, but it must be remarked that he was fond of sinking whatever ship happened to wander across his crosshairs, and sinking neutrals did not bother him the least. 4 of the 8 ships he sank in that boat were neutrals, though the Germans would go to war against Denmark and Norway just a few months later, of course. The Swede he sank, well, whatever, sir, I swear it was a belligerent. It was dark, it was foggy, I couldn't quite tell. They said they had a flag painted on the side. I don't believe it, blah, blah, blah. So it ought to be taken into account when throwing out raw stats about U-boat skippers and their great tonnage totals, that for a lot of these guys early on in the war, they sank a lot of neutrals and really didn't care. So lumping those into their grand totals for their great stats and ranking them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I don't think that's quite right. You're not supposed to sink the neutrals, even in unrestricted submarine warfare. And I know it's just a matter of record keeping and like discussion amongst guys like ourselves. Still don't think it's kind of right. So be that as may, it's interesting to note that Otto's boat was the first choice to try the Scapa Flow thing, but it was canceled in favor of Preen doing it. And the higher ups rethought the operation. And perhaps the idea of the heavier firepower in a Type 7 versus a Type 2 was the decider there. Probably a good idea, as Preen had to fire a couple spreads to get his torpedoes to work. Otto later complained that the book Preen wrote about Scapa Flow, Mein Weg nach Scapa Flow, which I somehow found a Kindle version of, believe it or not, was ghostwritten. Oh yeah, that sounds about right. Apparently Shepke had a little book out about around the same time that was also alleged to be ghostwritten. I haven't looked for that one though. Once promoted to the Type 7 U-99, he gets in full swing and he maximizes the night surface attack within the convoy. Benefiting from the short turnaround time from the coast of France and the easily reached convoys, therefore, in those early days he's able to make several patrols in short order and targets are plentiful. Along with the cargo ships, he's also responsible for getting 3, count them, 1, 2, 3, auxiliary cruisers in 99 to go along with the destroyer HMS Daring he sank in the U-23. These cruisers were the HMS Laurentic, 18,700 tons, HMS Patroclus, 11,000 tons, and HMS Frofar, 16,000 tons. Add on to that the Auckland Star, a cargo ship of 12,000, and then he's also given credit for finishing off a 20,000-ton whale ship brought to stop by another boat. And you can see that if you go by tonnage, he's racking up crazy numbers from very few targets. That's about 78,000 tons, 5 or 6 ships all by themselves. That's crazy, and no wonder he got the Oakleys for that. His time at port is a normal rush for a ship's captain, making reports, paperwork, supervising yard work, prepping for the new patrol. As his numbers rise, so does his fame, and he's on the newsreels and whatnot, and driven to give interviews. And there's some kind of music conductor or band conductor writes something called the Kretschmer March to honor him.
Kapitänleutnant Kretschmer, dem der Führer für seinen heldenhaften Einsatz das Eichenlaub zum Ritterkreuz verlieh. Als Zeichen der Verbundenheit des Heeres mit der Kriegsmarine hat ein Infanterieregiment die Patenschaft für das Unterseeboot Kretschmer übernommen. Hier die Ehrung des kühnen Kommandanten und seiner tapferen Mannschaft durch einen dem Kommandanten gewidmeten Marsch. Als Gegengabe der Rettungsring eines versenkten englischen Dampfers. Auslaufen zu neuer Feindfahrt. Das Musikchor des Patenregimentes gibt dem U-Boot bis auf See hinaus das Geleit. Die letzten wackeren Bläser, die als Landratten dem Seegang standhalten.
And post-war, he's got nothing but nothing but scorn for a certain novel called Das Boot. He said he got through the first chapter and threw it away. He thought it was trash. He didn't like that whorehouse scene at all. So he's kind of a straight-laced, prim and proper kind of guy. So leading up to Otto's final patrol and capture, we get a long discourse on the fate of U-47. Patterson's really hot to deny the idea that Wolverine caused her loss, and after making this rather lengthy case for that denial, the best he's got is that U-47 hit a mine on her way back to Lorient. As to the capture of Kretschmer, he goes heavily with a Macintyre account from U-Boat Killer, kind of straight up, just kind of transposing a few words, so it's not plagiarism. Otto didn't have much to say in contradiction other than to really about the sinking and the causes thereof, other to really rip to the watch officer who was on the bridge, who ordered U-99 to crash dive when Kretschmer had drilled into his crew to not do that on being sighted by a destroyer or an escort. They were to stay on the surface and run away as far and as long as practical to gain some distance and hope that intervening weather, a rain squall or fog, would help them ditch the pursuit before they submerged at a decent distance. But if you panic and crash dive right away, you've lost your mobility and you might be done for. In this case, that's exactly what happened. So the guy crash dives and they go out of control down to 700 feet. Kretschmer has to blow tanks and they pop to the surface and they're done. So in a total of 18 patrols, 10 in U-23 and 8 in U-99, he's credited with a whopping 47 ships sunk and 5 damaged. 8 of those were from U-23 and the rest were in U-99. That's got the rank at the top tier for getting the job done. It's reign of terror during what has been termed the happy time, coined by German crewmen, but if you ask the skippers about that, they didn't see anything happy about it. They thought it was rather rough, especially with the weather and the frequency of patrols and the tension and the strain on their nerves. Let's see, he first gets imprisoned in the UK, and then when news filters around about the U-570 being surrendered intact by its CO, shit kind of hits a fan. Court honor was convened in this camp, and German POWs were really big on these things, instilling their own discipline, harsh punishments in camps as a means of maintaining German military discipline. So when the Sergeant 570 surrendered and the Allies got all the goods, the Court of Honor, run by Otto, convicts Captain Romlo and his exec Berndt. When Berndt is put in this same camp, he is commanded to escape and scuttle the 570, and the German prisoners thought they knew where it was being evaluated. This is totally, realm of fantasy stuff. It's another way of getting the man executed without them doing it, basically, and that's what happens. Berndt does escape and is at large for a few days, but when spotted, he runs and the guards shoot him down. Not very smart of the Brits to put this dude in with other U-boat crewmen, very well knowing what could happen. Not smart at all. Otto then gets transferred to Canada, and after some shenanigans there, later in the war, he gets that crazy idea to have Donuts drop a U-boat up the Canadian River and pick up a bunch of him and his escapees that are going to break out of the camp. It's a cockamamie idea, and I can't understand for the life of me why Donuts thought this was a good idea to even attempt or encourage. But it ends in kind of a farce. Serious lack of judgment there. As a footnote, Romlo later tried to have Otto prosecuted for his role in the Court of Honor after the war, but there was very little interest in picking over those old bones. And of course, the U-570 was renamed HMS Graf and served in the RN, largely as a target ship for anti-submarine training. His later life is given kind of short shrift, and it comes to an end when he takes a bad step while going from boat to shore or shore to boat on a vacation late in life. Puts him in a hospital and he dies shortly thereafter. A rather odd and kind of sad ending to a very eventful life of one of the legends of the war. As mentioned earlier, he and Macintyre struck up a friendship later after the war. Otto would stay at his house on occasion, and Macintyre gave back the binoculars he took from Otto when he was captured in 41. Kind of cool, and he also spoke at his funeral. It's a good bio. It brings up to date the Terence Robertson's early attempt, Night Vols of the Atlantic, which I covered quite a while back. But it's rather shallow on the man's personality and his life before and after his most famous moments. It's kind of really, you're just there for the slice of action movie, all the Rambo stuff. But the before and after, it's really just not there. All in all, 3 stars. That's Otto Kretschmer by Lawrence Patterson. All right, steaming onwards. See what I did there? Let's get to Johnny Walker, Legend of the Royal Navy in World War II. Speaking of Terence Robertson a bit earlier, here he is giving us a bio of Walker from 1956, 234 pages. Escort Commander. And of course, have to show it off. It's another Bantam. This painting is pretty good, but it's not quite the measure of the one in U-Boat Killer. But pretty cool. Let's see. This is the most uneven effort from Robertson of the 3 books of his I own. The tone is kind of jubilant and overjoyed at many points in the destruction of U-boats. A tone completely missing from Night Raiders and the Channel Dash. He starts us off rough with the family history and some confused writing about the split nature of the couple's religious dominations and the choice of one of their sons to convert to Catholicism. The normal rumblings about low pay in the service and struggling to make ends meet, yada yada yada, which you hear all the time. But if you look closely at that, they're not living in the East End slums of London. They're not. They're doing okay. Let's see. It kind of gets away telling the story. And the story is that for a long time, Johnny Walker was just another lower grade officer doing his best to get along in the Navy and make the captain's list, which is considered necessary to have a successful career and get important postings, and yada, yada, yada. And you had to do this by a certain age or you're going to be passed over for such promotion forevermore. Walker was deemed to not to have leadership qualities and not enough drive to get up and go, and he was passed over. And he passed the ripe age, and they never considered him again until the war came. He spent a lot of time in the big ships early on, despised all the pomp and circumstance, which he thought had nothing to do at all with warfighting capabilities. And the real job of the Navy, which was to be prepared to fight when called upon. Let's see. So for the next 3 years, they're only, Walker spent some time in the big ships early on, despised the pomp and circumstance, which he thought had nothing to do at all with war-fighting capabilities and doing the daytime job of the Navy, which was defending the nation and sinking enemy ships. Not too far off base, if you ask this guy right here, think about what the big ships did after the Bismarck scare for the next 3 years. Not a whole hell of a lot. Their proudest moment is making sure Tirpitz didn't go anywhere. Come on, man. Remember, just stop. But I digress. Walker chose to specialize in anti-submarine warfare rather than gunnery, becoming fascinated in the art and science of hunting subs. But this choice gets him nowhere in a naval pecking order, of course, between the wars. He's finally rescued from shore duty by the war itself, and he's considered such a forward-looking officer all of a sudden that he goes to sea not just in a single ship, but as command of an escort group right from the get-go, right from the rip. Escort Group 36. Right off the beach. He had commanded a destroyer and a sloop in the interwar years, but what a jump. Straight to work he goes, and after workup and training with Escort Group 36, he's assigned to a Gibraltar run. The return trip from the Rock was escorting HG-76, a rather large convoy for the time, and boasting a very strong escort, plus the first British escort carrier, Audacity. A quick conversion job with a very small air group, essentially an experiment, and wasn't well thought out. Walker doesn't want to play defense, waiting for the U-boat to attack and then picking up the pieces afterwards. He wants to go after them as soon as they're sighted, hunting them down and making them submerge. Realizing they lost mobility and they were done. Either he can destroy them immediately or keep them down long enough so they can't regain contact with the convoy later. Essentially, that's just getting the job done right there. If you prevented the attack in the first place, you've won. So this is how it plays out. He's pinning down U-boats, and the Audacity's air group is helping to spot them, as well as fending off snoopers in the form of Focke-Wulf 200s. And despite a couple of escorts having to go back to Gibraltar because of their very short legs, and this was foreseen, his escort group does good work over the course of a week's time, fending off and putting under several U-boats. The defense is fantastic, but the Audacity's loss points up a huge problem in this convoy battle. There were in effect 3 commanders, or senior officers afloat, if you want to use the USN term. You had Walker in charge of the escort group, you had the convoy commodore in charge of the cargo ships, and then you had the CEO of Audacity who ranked them both. No command and control arrangements were made before the escort sailed, so nobody knew who was to do what and who was in charge of what in the overall sense. There was no supreme, hey, I make the rules, you do what I say kind of thing. Absolutely would not happen in the United States Navy. Absolutely not. I wonder what Ernie King thought of this when he heard about this. I bet his reaction was kind of sarcastic. So it just points up that they just don't quite know what they're doing. They got this great air asset they hustled to convert and don't know how to use it. Should it hang out in the convoy after dark? Should it operate on its own behind the convoy? And they only gave it 2 escorting corvettes to keep it company. Not enough, of course, and it pays a price for this lack of foresight. So there's another curious thing about this convoy. One of the boats sunk, U-434, presents a curious thing. Robertson says that the 45 or so depth charges fired at her caused not only flooding but so much pressure built up in the boat that one of the torpedoes in the aft room exploded, which was the final straw forcing the captain to bring her up to the surface. That's page 440 in the Robertson book. Checking back to the U-Boat Bible, Volume 1 is written by Clay Blair, page 413. There is silence on this matter. It brings up an intriguing question for those explosive experts out there. Can high pressure by itself induce an explosive device to go boom? I don't know, but common sense that says that if it did go boom a few hundred feet below the surface, that boat would have never have surfaced. That would blow out the entire compartment and its watertight bulkhead. Results obvious. I can't recall another moment in U-boat history where a torpedo exploded within the ship. Anyone? This is 1950s bio, so there's no references at the end of the book. Maybe there was a hardback if it was issued that way. So that sets us up for the loop, of course, of the book. Much like U-boat commanders, you get on patrol, you sink ships, you come back, you escort commander, you go out and escort convoys, you come back, you do it again. Shore duty for a bit of refit and a bit of leave, then back out the door you go. In 44, he's in charge of not just a support group, which is what they called hunter-killer groups, but he's also got another the close escort of a convoy to be in charge of, and a carrier. And he's all in charge of it as just a captain with the communications equipment aboard a lonely little sloop. It's just not enough. It's got to just wear him to the bone. And again, command and control arrangements here are just sloppy as hell. Why in the heck would you have a non-aviation officer in charge of carriers? It just doesn't make sense. His U-boat tally, though, it continues to rise upwards. You know, he's got a couple different attacks he does, which are kind of innovative. The creepy attack. He had the Buttercup thing early on, and then he's got the Operation Plaster, where you just throw everything down on top of them, and something's going to stick. So his group is eventually credited overall with 20 U-boat kills. It's crazy. He's the #1 escort group commander with the most kills. And his most remarkable feat is a 19-day sortie beginning in late January and ending at Liverpool on February 19 of 44. He's now in charge of Support Group 2, and he's floating between 3 different convoys. And they bagged 6 U-boats in that time, 5 of the 6 which had no survivors. In brief, U-592 on January 31, U-762 on February 6, commanded by Pietschmann. U-238, February 9th, commanded by Hepp. U-734, February 9th, also by Georg Blauert. U-424 on February 11th by Georg Luters. And U-264 by Hartwig, commanded by Hartwig Lux, Type 7 with a snort. All the crew was rescued off this last one. After this, he gets a trip to Russia with the task of delivering an American cruiser, the Milwaukee, to Stalin as a gift. They get one U-boat, U-961, and a single depth charge pattern attack, but the rest of the convoy, they're hampered by bad sound conditions, fog and haze, and he is not in love with the Russia run any more than Macintyre was. Then they chase down another boat later on after the Russia run, and it's a gun battle, which is kind of a rare thing at this point in the war. Walker had refused several shore assignments to give him some time away to rest up, and the war was grinding him down. And it results in a stroke on July 9th, 1944. No other escort group ever equaled his record, and his funeral was attended by nearly 1,000 people, and his body was carried out to sea on the Hesperus, where it was committed to the deep in western approaches. Walker did not like new ideas. He had definite ideas. He didn't like new equipment. He didn't like the Foxers that were mandatory to carry to counter the T5 Nats. He figured he had the way to do it, either at less than 7 knots or higher than 19 knots. Either the torpedo couldn't hear your screws, or you could run away from it. And he didn't like any other fancy gear. He hated it. And he didn't like, after his experience with carriers and commanding them, while he was an escort commander, he didn't like carriers with the group. He said he didn't really have any need for them. He didn't have any use. Land-based air was good enough for him. He didn't need carriers on the spot. And I wonder what Daniel Gallery of the United States Navy would think of that. Kind of interesting. I gave it 3 stars. It's hampered by the jubilant tone of the prose and the very narrow focus on Walker's seagoing life. I think a modern bio would expand the focus of the cast of characters to give more detail about his time in the big ships, and of course on the China station, as well as his years ashore, and the hunt for promotion and worrying about the promotion list all the time. I would also think we'd look, kind of take a top-down look at the different phases of the U-boat war and how Walker was in these, and how tactics shifted, and how they gained the upper hand, and did they really know they had the upper hand, and how paranoid were they worrying about still potentially losing after May of 43, or were they just really knew they had it by the tail and weren't just doing the job to lose as few ships after that as possible. I don't know. It's an early bio, obviously, and someone by now has probably redone it, his life in greater form. So we'll see. It's 3 stars, and it's worthwhile. It's not phenomenal. It's worthwhile. And so that will wrap it up today for our water excursion on the convoy lanes. I'd have to say of the three, my favorite is the U-boat killer, obviously. Macintyre's war largely echoes Walker's, and of course they knew one another, but it just comes across a bit more fascinating to me, perhaps because of the first-person touch. All of them are good additions to your Battle of the Atlantic bookshelf, and I'm certain that all of you out there have a shelf dedicated just to that thing, the Battle of the Atlantic. Am I right? I'm Max Horton, and now that the war has ended, just about over, it's time for me to step aside and retire so that younger officers coming up in the ranks can have a chance at a flag billet, and I don't hog the seniority list forever. They certainly earned the promotions during the war, and I think they deserve it, and I'm going to get out of the way. Until next time, happy reading.